that scene at the beginning, the first time that he goes for her hearing aids and rips them out of her ears and she starts bleeding, like, that's gut-wrenching. Like, because, like,
there's a lot of gut-wrenching in
there's
this
a
movie.
lot of just really intense, heavily kind of realistic scenes in this movie, and just the way that they depict them is fantastic, just because, like, it's not like, you know, it's not like Fist of the North Star, he rips out the earring and it's just a bucket of blood that's flying out of her ear.
Wow.
It's this really subtle...
Wow, never thought about that before.
Welcome back to the WMC Weekly Podcast, the Weekly Motion Canon. I am your host, Christopher Hitchcock, and this week we have this weird person. His name is Josh Dunham. I think he runs this stupid website or something like that. I don't know. Like, you can go ahead and introduce yourself. I guess I don't know if anyone's heard of you. Or...
No, I run the website, what was it, Anime Maru? Like, I'm editor-in-chief of Anime Maru and The Onion. It's a very full plate, but I make it work, and yeah, I'm just glad to be on the show.
Yeah, it's about time you've been on, because I mean we've been asking for you for weeks and weeks, and you're just like, oh, the Sakuga, and we can't show Sakuga through audio, and the other person's Jimmy Gnome. Go ahead and say hi, Jimmy.
Hey, I'm back. It's Jimmy Gnome again. I'm ready to talk about some good anime this week for the first time.
Well, we've talked about good anime before. I mean, at least I have. I don't know about you guys, but this week we're talking about a movie that is a silent voice. This movie kind of hit online recently because it got released on Blu-ray in Japan or something like that, so of course now it's online. And we went ahead and watched it.
The real deal, the reason that we actually have it so early, close to the Blu-ray release, is that it's already been licensed in European territories. I'm not sure exactly which ones, but there's some streaming service that offered it like within a week of it releasing on Blu-ray in Japan, subbed in English. So there are actually some legal avenues to see this if you are living in Europe and you get on that streaming service. But unfortunately, it's not been announced that it's coming in any sort of way or form to North America yet, which is sort of ridiculous.
It's going to get picked up by Aniplex, and they're going to charge like $210.
Well, I mean,
but there'll be a nice coloring book included with it.
That'd be nice, because at least then it would get a pretty good theater run.
That would be nice. I could totally go down to the plaza to see that.
Yeah, going down to the plaza and seeing it would be pretty cool.
Yeah, this movie definitely needs a theatrical run to get the full experience of it, I think.
It's just baffles me that this film hasn't had any sort of like licensing announcement or anything like that. I mean, even like since the last time we recorded the Your Name pod, I was talking about In This Corner of the World and how I wanted that to also get a license here, and that's been announced as getting a theater run in August. So like, where's the silent voice? or shape of the voice, or whatever you'd like to call this film.
Yes, or the Japanese name, which...
Koe no Katachi.
There you go, because I will just butcher that, even though part of it is literally just koi. I think I probably already butchered that, so there you go. This episode's off to a great start. Anyway.
You've offended the Nihon gods.
There are some koi in this film. So you're
There
not
are.
too far off.
They do spend a lot of time in this movie feeding the fish, which is quite nice and relaxing to watch. So, does anyone want to go ahead and give a quick plot synopsis about what this movie is before we dive further into it?
So, the general outline of the film, without spoiling too much, is that there happens to be a girl who is deaf. Nishimiya, what was her first name? I forget. Shoko, right?
Yes.
So it's Shoko Nishimiya. She, and this takes place originally in an elementary school. She, kind of gets transferred in. She's deaf, and so that causes some angst amongst the class. Our main character, Ishida, he is, a young punk, a kid, and basically...
Yeah, this kid's a little bastard.
ends up kind of bullying... Not kind of. I mean, they outright bully her, and then the whole class kind of turns on her because she's different. That kind of happens. She ends up getting transferred out because of the amount of damages either done to her hearing aid or her getting roughed up and being sent home all the time, this, that, the other thing. Ishida then becomes the next target at school. He grows up various years and starts feeling really bad about, some of the shitty things he's done. Now he's kind of on the receiving end of it. And he's about ready to end his life when he starts to think, well, what if I go and see her one more time or something like that, and just try and make some sort of amends, He tries to start repairing stuff.
See, at the beginning of the film, it's him going, they do a whole flashback scene with the elementary stuff to set things up at the beginning, but the very first scene is of him going to commit suicide, and there's for finality's sake, he goes and finds Shoko again just to sort of close that relationship, I guess. That was his original plan, but things sort of go differently than he expects, and it ends up turning his life around a bit.
Yeah, because the way that I saw it was that he was making all these plans, he was going to pay off the debt that he paid to his mom, he was going to quit his work properly, and basically just make it so that his disappearance from the world was going to be as clean as possible so that no one would have to worry about him when he was gone. And his biggest regret in his life at that point was him bullying this deaf girl, and he wanted to go and apologize. And at that moment, when he kind of realizes that he can be a bit better, or he could strive to do more, that he kind of wants to turn his life around. And it's because when I heard people talking about A Silent Voice for the longest time, people were kind of selling it to me as this romance film about this deaf girl, and I don't really think that's what this movie is at all. It's more,
not really at all.
Yeah, it's more about this guy basically kind of learning to forgive himself and to basically learn how to interact with people again. Especially after because after he gets labeled as a bully, everyone kind of turns against him, and he doesn't have any friends anymore, and he's the one getting picked on. And the one person who is trying to help him in this situation, the deaf girl, is he kind of bites at her and just kind of rejects her help and whatnot, and he decides to go it alone for the next couple of years. And when he realizes that was the wrong thing to do, he tries to turn his life around and starts making friends. And I really do like the kind of the way that they decide to depict how he separates himself from everybody is by not making eye contact with people, which I think that's the most fascinating thing to me about this movie, is how they go around depicting that with how... Because not only do they depict this by him kind of mentally visualing that every single person he doesn't like has an X across their face, but just whenever it's the point of view shots, it's lower shots of him looking at their feet or their hands. And at first it kind of seems like he's looking at the hands because he's trying to learn sign language. But after a while, you kind of pick up that, no, he's doing this because he literally can't face people he doesn't know or trust. And be it out of guilt or just because he's afraid of interacting with people. And I really do like how they depicted that in this movie.
So I think we should. I sort of wanted to start on the foot of this is an adaptation of a manga, and I've never read the manga. I know that Josh has read at least some of the manga before this, because I recall him being a fan, and like, for me, I can definitely tell that this is a manga adaptation. Sometimes it feels like they're trying to condense a lot, because this isn't like a short manga either. It has like many volumes.
Well, it's not. I mean, comparatively, it's pretty short. I mean, 7 volumes. When you're talking about condensing into a film, yeah, it's not the shortest thing.
Yeah, not optimal. Yeah,
7 volumes though. I mean, like, we've seen 13 episode series condensed down into, you know.
Yeah.
You stop and do the math that way. I mean, that's not too much longer than a 2-hour film. But I mean, you're gonna lose some things in an adaptation. Period. I mean, that's the point of adapting.
Yes, that is the point in adapting. And it's not me feeling like you're losing something. In fact, I feel in many senses, this film is a great standard of showing how you can use the medium itself to differentiate the film enough from an adaptation that, like, I can tell just by watching this film that there is a lot of embellishment being made. And going back and reading like interviews and stuff, I've learned that yes, this is a very different kind of property than the original manga. And honestly, it's like really weird to me that, I mean, I guess that the creator just manga was the way that they decided to take it. But for me, this film is sort of like, it's very hard to divorce the sound from this film, because there's so much already, like the film is depicting both a character who is deaf and also a character that refuses to listen, and the ways that it does that is just really like one of the most fascinating aspects of the film in general. Like, the sound directors did an incredible job on this. So thinking about how this was originally a manga, like I don't know if I could even, like, I'm sure the experience is totally different.
It really is, actually. But it's interesting that you mentioned sound, because I felt the voice acting on this was some of the best voice acting I've heard in a really long time, especially with Nishimiya. And of course, she's deaf, and so the thing is, when she goes to speak, the words aren't formed properly. It sounds like a deaf person who's kind of trying to approximate the sounds that they see versus, you know, fully hearing them like you and I are right now. I mean, we're all sitting here listening to a podcast. You know, enunciation is everything, and you're listening to this, you know, this movie. You're watching the movie, and she's trying to speak. And when she's trying to speak, I'll be 100% honest with you. Like, you know, granted, I don't speak Japanese either, so, you know, I probably didn't have a chance in hell understanding. But, you know, simple words that you would think you would understand by watching a shit ton of anime just come out totally and completely different. And to be able to capture that in a performance, it was, I would say, akin to what was the movie that came out not too long ago, The Theory of Everything, you know, where you had Stephen Hawking's depicted. I mean, it was very, I want to say, a very tasteful and a very eye-opening experience to see a disability portrayed, although through animation, but actually, you know, you could feel the struggle that Nishimiya has when she opens her mouth and tries to get along with people by normal speech. Or I say normal speech, that sounds a little bit derogatory, but by spoken word. You know, it comes across as a struggle, a real challenge for her. It's absolutely amazing what that voice actress is able to do.
And I think that, like, yeah, her performance is just incredible. Even early on, like the scene where she is confronted by Ishida when they're kids, and like the bullying is starting to turn on him, and he just sort of bullies her in this empty classroom, and it's sort of like sunset, and she yells at him that she's just trying her best, like, oh
that was
my god,
that was a
like,
bullet
that
train,
scene,
yeah.
that was the first part of this film that I was like, oh, up here it goes, and tears are coming. And there are other moments, plenty of other moments in the film that continue those tears, but that one was just that was when I realized this film was something else.
Yeah.
Like, this is a really special film.
Because I'll be honest, the first 10 minutes of this movie were incredibly hard for me to watch because I don't like watching people get bullied. I don't find that to be entertainment. And, like, anything, this movie reaffirms my belief that children are just monsters to each other and that they're just unredeemable little shit bastards. And just, because, like, there's this, like, for me, like, the worst scene is...
Well, don't hold back. Tell us how you really feel, CJ.
Well,
yeah, come on.
I don't like children, alright? They're awful. But anyway, they're, that scene at the beginning, the first time that he goes for her hearing aids and rips them out of her ears and she starts bleeding, like, that's gut-wrenching. Like, because, like,
There's a lot of gut-wrenching in
there's
this
a
movie.
lot of just really intense, heavily kind of realistic scenes in this movie, and just the way that they depict them is fantastic, just because, like, it's not like... You know, it's not like Fist of the North Star, he rips out the earring and it's just a bucket of blood that's flying out of her ear.
Wow.
It's this really subtle...
Wow. Never thought about that before.
You know, it's funny because Digibro was comparing JoJo's and K-On! So now we've got the Fist of the North Star silent voice. You've heard it here first on the weekly podcast, WMC. Thank you. Have a good night.
Anyway... But, yeah, because, like, it's not anything huge. Like, it's this, like, he pulls it out. He doesn't really realize that he's hurt her, and she's covering her ears, and blood begins dripping down the side of the outline of her face. And it's really good because, like, you don't see it from the head. You see it from his perspective, which is from behind. And, again, like, it's
very sobering.
Yes.
Like it makes you, like, take a step back.
Yeah, because this isn't like you pulled out your earbuds on your iPod, you know? Like, this is, like, someone took this metal thing and ripped it from your ear. Yeah. And, like, that scene is painful to watch, especially the moment where she's just grasping her ear and blood starts coming down. Well, and, again, like, it's this really small, subtle thing, but it's the way that they depict it in this movie... It's painful to watch.
How about that scene with the when the mother goes, when Ishida's mother has to go pay up all the damages?
That was it.
And then she comes back with a bloody ear. And you can see her earrings missing. It's just like, wow, Shoko's mother, although rightfully vindicated, is a bit mean.
She's the MVP of this movie. I swear. Like that scene, I was so, like, I was feeling the guilt, like, so much guilt that I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah. Well,
just watching that scene in the movie.
Well, like, when he comes back to the house for the first time, and, because, like, there's a scene that follows before the mother gets the phone call of him, that he's been bullying this girl, where, main dude gets pushed into this pond, and he's soaking wet, and he starts walking upstairs, and this mother just kind of goes, just like, I just got this call from the school. Are you seriously bullying this girl? And, like, she kind of stops for a moment, just like, wait, why are you wet? Like, I love that scene because, like, she's angry at what this kid has done, but at the same time, she still cares about him. And
it's disappointment,
again, like, it's a very...
Disappointment from a mother is a very, very powerful thing. And although, you're right, he's a little shitbag, to steal your words. You know, Ishida is still a child. And to a certain degree, what he's doing is just exploring an otherness. He's exploring it in a very wrong and painfully hurtful way. But he's not being taught by the adults around him. In my opinion, Ishida's actions are somewhat forgivable versus the actual teachers who are absolutely... don't understand, fucking leave him by the side.
I agree with the way that teacher acts in the first part of the movie. Like, that's
absolutely infuriating. And then, of course, what was her name there? Who decides she's going to learn sign language there to help Shoko? What was Sahara or something like that?
Oh, yeah, Sahara.
And she's like, I'm going to learn sign language. And now, see, here's the thing. And I'm kind of opening up another can of worms, so we can get back to this. But I felt the film had some major structure and pacing issues. But
I agree. I agree with that. I think me reading the interviews that Sakuga Blog posted gave me some sort of insight in how this film is structured, and it seems like this is how I was feeling, and I sort of justified by this interview, is that the approach to adapting this was more of taking individual scenes and that are like really great.
Yeah,
and
I think
sort of
that was a
patching them
mistake.
together.
That was.
Yeah, because there are moments in this movie where it does kind of feel like one of the kind of like one of the Gundam movie trilogies where they kind of piece together scenes from an overlong series and patch it together into one movie.
And that a lot of things like Ishida's initial attempt at suicide feel very trivialized and kind of brushed aside versus and we're going to go into deep spoilers, I'm assuming, because obviously we've all seen this film, so I just want to warn any listeners, like, at this point, we talked about maybe the first 10 minutes, like, we haven't even talked about anything, so...
Yeah, we haven't done any post-time
so going into
stuff,
spoiler
really.
territory, you know, obviously that latter half of the film where Nishimiya and she's about to commit suicide, like, that is dramatic. That is, you feel that entire scene is powerful.
My God.
It is the best scene of the film, not because of the subject matter, but because of the pure and raw humanity that is on display. The way, I mean, I can go on and on, but let me cut back for a moment. Compare that to the opening where Ishida's like, you know, I'm really done. You don't get the same feeling because they open with that. They jump too quickly, and reading the manga and then
I think another
seeing
part
the bully then become bullied is a very complex emotion because you're like, well, this is kind of what he deserves, but no one really deserves to go through that. And then he gets to the point where he's willing to commit suicide. There's a very complex emotion that's going on there. I understand why they did it the way they did. I still feel like it was a mistake. They should have handled it much better. They should have let it breathe. And I felt kind of, I don't want to say mad, but it ultimately ends where they're just going to laugh it off. Oh no, the money's burnt. Ha ha ha, don't kill yourself.
That scene when his mom confronts him about his suicidal tendencies, that I really felt that hard. Like, I don't know, anything with Ishida's mom, I really like her. She is
best girl.
Her character is really good, even though she doesn't have a whole lot of screen time, but like she is a positive force.
Yeah,
in this film.
I actually did like that scene quite a bit of her accidentally burning the money because
she reframes it pretty nicely.
Yeah, well, to compare it to Your Name, like.
Oh, what are we gonna go ahead and step into this?
I don't know if you want to step on that landmine or not, but I'll take one for the team. Because, like, with the humor that's in Your Name, it's so disjointed and really ruins these really tender moments. Well, here in this movie, it does kind of feel more natural as things that would go on. Because, like, they let things happen. Like, the big emotional moment of him being confronted by his mother about having suicide tendencies, like, that has happened. What they need to do with that scene has been done, and then they do the gag. And it also kind of helps that is, like, it is also a pretty funny gag, you know, how they end up both burning their hands, and just, it's a good visual gag that they do, too.
It's less than, I think that it's better in the sense that the gag itself is a continuation of the positive message of the scene, which is like at the end she says, I wouldn't have wanted to spend money that you saved to kill yourself anyways. And it's like, I don't know, it's a nice little like last just where you had the full catharsis of their confrontation is just a nice sort of warm down from the scene. It's a good like last
from
note
memory, as memory serves, and it could be
it.
flawed because it's been a while since I've read this manga. It's up on Crunchyroll, so anyone wants to read it, you can just go read it on Crunchyroll, by the way. But I don't remember it being played like a joke like that. And this isn't, I'm not trying to phrase the argument of, well, it was better in the manga. It just felt, if you're going to add something, why'd you add it there? I didn't feel like it was a positive affirmation of their relationship because obviously at that point they didn't have enough relationship where Ishida felt like he could talk to his mother. And understandably, I'm not saying that's the prerequisite, but my point is, you know, they're suddenly just going to joke around and pretend everything's hunky-dory and just like the money being burnt and everything. The message is wonderful. That scene has a great underlying message, but I feel the joke was definitely mistimed in that situation. But I mean, they were trying to cram so much into that first act that it's kind of a testament to me just how disjointed that the structure of the film can be at points. Now, granted, this is a great freaking film, absolutely amazing, and I'm not saying this is bad by any means. It could have been better. I expected a higher caliber, especially with the subject matter, because I saw later in the film they were definitely able to deliver. So it was, I don't know, maybe they just didn't want to delve that deeply in the beginning. I mean, they took like the first couple parts of the manga and then kind of like mixed them around with other parts, and it was just,
it didn't flow as well. That would be that would be what I would say is there's some good editing in the film that makes certain parts flow better. Like we mentioned earlier, when Ishida falls into the lake, I really, really like how they cut from the scene with Nishimiya. Like she falls into the lake because Ishida's bullying her, and then it cuts right to Ishida in the lake, and then they go back and show you what led to that. They take these two basically like a callback to a previous scene and place them right together so that you immediately know, like, I don't know, it's a very good visual turning point for the film, and it makes that section flow a lot better to me, but you can still feel that there's like a lot of disjointedness here and there. But for me, like, it doesn't bother me as much, because to me this film is less about telling like a single cohesive story as much as it is expressing feelings, and I think that it does that job of expressing feelings incredibly well, like almost all the time. There are only a handful of times where like some of the side characters I just don't feel were necessary for inclusion, outside of the fact that you need a friend group for the theme of this show to work. And
they were like the guy with the red hair.
I feel like they could.
That dude could have been scrapped.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Where it's like I understand that like we need to have this communal space that Ishida like finds himself in, and is like he regains his positivity and then later disassociates from, but pretty much all the side characters, they feel out of place in the film.
There are a couple of them that are actually pretty well placed, like Ueno is pretty integral, I feel, to the whole dynamic. But I guess my thing, just to end the conversation with the beginning there, I just felt like the way they presented it was what defined Ishida's character. What defined his character was his suicide. That's the first thing you meet him. It's like, oh, this guy's gonna die. Why? Or he wants to kill himself. Why? It's like that should not have been his defining character trait. Yeah, that should have been the bullying, because him being a bully and changing is the whole point. Because that's the thing that keeps getting brought up. It's not a suicide. His suicide is an after effect because of his character, and they should have presented that first and then worked into the dramatic nature instead of trying to open with the dramatic nature and then explain it to you. I felt like the tell you after, here's what's happening. They're trying to do an attention grab, trying to move the story along quickly. It's not bad, it's just not as good as I expected. I expected a much higher caliber.
I can sort of feel where you're coming from, but for me, if we're talking about Ishida's character in this film, basically the entire film is him overcoming his depression, and it only really happens right at the end when he takes his hands off his ears and can finally like look people in the face, look around in a crowd and see all these people and really like live in the moment. And I think that while that sort of message it's good to frame that message as having him start out being depressed, like lead the film with him having this issue. My issue with it is just that when he admits to his mom that he tried to commit suicide and sort of has a rebirth, like he tapes a new, like the rest of the calendar onto the one that he ripped at the beginning. it feels like he's overcoming something, but in reality, he's
Well,
still
yeah,
trapped
it's like
in
it's
his
like
own...
instead of repairing the calendar, he just gave himself more time before he was going to off himself.
like-
Because I always kind of I never really got the sense watching this movie, and I have not read the manga in any way, shape, or form. I've just been exposed to this movie, and that's about it. But the feeling that I got from it was that I didn't really get the sense that he was suicidal. He was someone who was suffering from a lot of guilt that did leave him to want to commit suicide at one moment, and then kind of realize he could fix it. And that was kind of what the movie was about, was him trying to not just live with the guilt of what he had done, but trying to move past it. And that feeling of guilt was like a product of his depression and whatnot. So I always kind of felt like that was, like, that's what the movie was ultimately about. Like, that's what his deal was in this movie, was it was more about him living with his guilt.
Like, for me, the real peak of the film was the end of him opening up finally. But before that, he already feels like he's come a long way. And I don't know, maybe it's just that I'm trying to boil down something that's way more complex than I'm making it out to be. It's just that, to me, it felt like there was significant development that
I don't think it's wrong to say that it's super complex. I think you're 100% right in that regard, because when you watch the film, I agree. I think CJ's interpretation of the calendar, let's start with that thought. I think that's very, very accurate, although it's never like explicitly stated. But you get the sense that this guy is literally just living until the next time he can see Nishimiya. And that's fine, because that's his goal. He's made a goal. I'm going to start fixing this relationship.
Yeah,
and through that, he starts to fix his other relationships, and it becomes wonderful. But the thing is, some people who have the X's on their face, right? These people that he doesn't talk to, or he isn't allowed to talk to, or he isn't allowed to associate with mentally, right? He blocks them out. He's deaf to them. You know, the whole film is about communication. That's really what it's about. And
yes,
some people get the X's on their face, and then it falls off and it goes back on. Like, he regresses but moves forward. So there's always a forward momentum. Sometimes, and I say forward momentum, I'm talking the plot. There's always a forward momentum. Sometimes it's the character regressing, especially with his relationship with Ueno, who, is a bit of a jerk a lot of the time. So sometimes she has an X on her face, sometimes it falls off, sometimes he's cool with her, sometimes she is, I hate to say it, she's kind of bitchy. There's definitely a progression there.
The scene that defines that character the most is easily the scene where we meet up with her again when they're in high school. She sees this, the deaf girl for, like, it's been 5 or something years since they've last met, and the first thing she does is that she goes for her earpiece again. So, like, yeah, that's a bitch and a monster.
This is one of the issues that I have with these with the side cast, which is probably my biggest issue in the second half of the film, is that most of whereas Ishida and Nishimiya, they feel real. They feel like people with issues that like they go through cycles of like making things better, and sometimes things get worse based on their interactions with other people. But all the side characters
Yuzuru is pretty good.
One note and not real. Like it's absolutely insane to me that Ueno acts like she does. Like, I don't know, like, that doesn't seem real to me, that she just walks up to this person that she's not seen in forever, being someone who is like not quite an adult, but I mean, like,
no, it makes sense from a cultural standpoint, though.
Character progression.
So Japan
in the gap.
has this major issue when it comes to bullying. They have their own special term for it, and they just literally will ostracize the non-normal person.
I can feel that for the first part of the film. What's weird to me is how forward they are later in the film with their emotions.
But the thing is, this bullying goes all the way up until the corporate level in real life Japan. Like, this sort of thing happens. So when you think about it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense to us because we expect children to overcome an issue of bullying, right? But unfortunately, that's not exactly the case all the time in a lot of these environments. And so, like,
it's not. I'm not saying that they should overcome the issue of bullying. It's more that, like, I can understand Ueno still disliking her and being passive aggressive and like bullying her like she did as a child. But what's weird to me is how like active and forward she is with it, instead of being in a context where she has the support of like a crowd, which is generally like the incentive of bullying. She sort of goes against everything just because like it's her character to be the bully. Like that's how it feels to me. And like in the same way, like there's that girl who's like her name is Miki Kawaii.
she is very kawaii.
That's the one who changes her hair halfway through the movie.
Yeah,
right?
she's the Incho class president.
Yes, that's right. She sort of like the way that she communicates doesn't feel real either. Like she just sort of spouts things that like are plot relevant sometimes, and then it'll cause issues most of the time. Like she'll just like say a bunch of shit and then people will get mad. Essentially is what happens.
Let's hold off on that right there, because Ueno, I think, and if I remember, and I could be making this up, maybe this is like headcanon, so someone call me out, you're listening to this, but I distinctly remember, and I got the impression even by just watching the film, take the film for what it is, right? Separate source material. I felt there was definitely a sense of jealousy from Ueno because obviously Ishida likes Nishimiya.
Yeah, that
Ueno is
certainly
very much in the way her body language is, the way she talks. She is attracted to Ishida. She has a crush on him. And so my thinking is when you have a scene like that where she just comes over and then takes out the earpiece or whatever, it's extreme jealousy. She was bullied, or Nishimiya was bullied back in elementary or middle school or whatnot. Let's pick right up where we were at, because that's what she's trying to do, quote unquote, romantically or in a relationship in some degree, right? With her friendship with Ishida, she's trying to pick up right where they left off. And where did they leave off? Bullying.
Well, right where they left off, minus the part where things sort of went bad.
Well, I mean, things always went bad. I mean,
that. Well, yeah, no, I mean, like in terms of when she turned her back on Ishida, she's like trying to just sort of wave that away. And the way that she does it is we're just gonna bully.
Exactly. You find the quote unquote lesser person in the room, the least of us, and we're just gonna persecute them until they can't take it anymore. Like that's the way bullying always trickles downwards to the least.
I can feel that, but like just to me, it seems like Ueno is probably the most socially adept. Like she's characterized that way as being like the one who is most like in tune with the crowd. And to me, it feels like she would easily read how Ishida's acting in that scene specifically, because he's like, get off my bike.
That's why specifically she did it.
I'm friends with this chick, and yeah, but I mean, it
just felt forced for
her
you
to read that. Yeah, it feels super forced. that was one of the scenes that I was like, oh, okay, here is the adversary of this film, which I didn't really expect there to be an adversary. And later, she's characterized as not being so bad.
I would not think.
To me, that section really felt like there was an antagonist of the relationship that was being formed, and it just, I don't know, it didn't.
Yeah, I say labeling her as an antagonist, I think that's a little bit too far. But one thing I will say, though, in addition to the cultural representation of bullying, one of my major problems with this film that I almost kind of vehemently disagree with is there's a very big sense of everyone shares part in the blame, and I think that's kind of bullshit. Especially when it comes to Nishimiya, and they're like, Nishimiya, you never actually tried to communicate with us. And I'm sitting there like, she's fucking deaf. Like, she brought a notebook to school so you could write on. Like, you were all kids. What did you want her to do?
That I feel that. I feel that. And to me,
that's another kind of culturalism. Is that a lot of times, I can't recommend it enough. There's a book, Shutting Out the Sun. It's specifically about hikikomori, but addresses the bullying issue in Japan. in America, you get bullied, your kid gets bullied, you come home and be like, call the faculty, what's going on? You got to protect my kid, look out for him. But in Japan, sometimes it's more along the lines of, well, what did you do to not fit in? And that whole idea is applied to Nishimiya. It's like, what did you do to not fit in? Like, she's fucking deaf. Like, and the thing is, the culture, that whole idea pushes Nishimiya to the point where she wants to commit suicide because she understands how other she is and how much pain she's put Ishida in just by her existence. And I feel like that is a great cultural message
thing is, though,
for us to understand, but it kind of cops out in the story.
I don't really see that as a cultural thing, though, because when I was in school, to kind of talk a little bit about personal life and whatnot, when I was in middle school, I was associated with this PALS program, which basically, the long and short of it is that we were supposed to be the best and brightest students of the school, and we would do community service. And part of the community service that was included would be to help with the special needs kids. And in my experience with associating with special needs kids and whatnot, I feel like that mentality of what you were talking about, Josh, still applies to people with disabilities, be it physical or mental, that they are always going to feel like they're going to be shut out and, bullied for what they're going to do. And I do feel like this movie nails that really, really well, regardless of what culture it's taking place. Like, I feel like that is one thing that is a very universal feeling that I feel with people like you and me who don't have disabilities, that we don't really get to experience. If anything, kind of like with what Yuho did at the beginning of the movie, where she gets jealous for reading this thing slightly incorrectly, and then the deaf girl reads it, butchers it completely, and the teacher just lets it pass because she's deaf. So, like, that feeling that normal people will have of being like, why is she getting special treatment over me, especially when she's screwing it up more. Like, that's a pressure that people with disabilities have all the time. And it's
Don't misunderstand. I'm not referring to like the disability itself. I want to make it clear. Like, the movie, there's a point specifically where Ueno says, like, it's your fault. Actually, I think there are 2 points in the film. Where it's like, it's your fault, and the movie just kind of moves on. It's like, oh, that's and the movie just kind of nods its head and said, "Yep, see," and
it sort of accepts sharing
and that
part of the
that to me was wrong. That's the
with
cultural part that I'm kind of
Shoko.
referring to.
I feel that. I also feel that, and like, to me, like, the friend group's general obsession with, like, I can understand Ishida being obsessed with his own guilt because he took the brunt of it and it changed his life. And I can understand Nishima, like, although she basically, I mean, she's there during the bridge scene, but, like, she doesn't really do anything. Like, she just sort of stands there and everybody argues about her.
Yeah, so explain the bridge scene a little bit, though, because I think that's very integral to what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, so, like, the bridge scene is when, the girl who I mentioned earlier, Miki Kawaii, she comes to school and, like, makes a big deal out of Ishida's previous bullying, and Ishida runs away to the bridge where they feed the fish, and basically the whole friend group gathers there, and then they have a big confrontation about their past, and it sort of plays out a lot in the same way that their confrontations did as children, and Ishida just ends up, like, sitting on the ground and just, like, distancing himself from everybody. He just says all the wrong things.
Well, to be a little bit more specific, I mean, he starts calling them on their shit, and pretty much everybody, he's being rude and overly bulldogish about it, but he's kind of being correct. Like, Sahara, she was a child, so she ran away from the issue because she was being bullied, but he kind of says, like, oh, you're just gonna run away again. So it's like he's being a dick, but but the point is his it's based in some tiny little fraction of a truth, and so it cuts very deeply, and he does this for, like, every single person. And so, of course, Nishimiya is the only one who doesn't get blamed. She can't, see him because he's, like, sulking into the ground, right? She doesn't know what's going on. And then later they blame her. It's like, well, you didn't change either, so you're also just like us, haha. No.
It's just, to me, like, it doesn't seem like these other friends would have such a stake in this, because after they shifted their blame over to Ishida and sort of piled all the sins onto him, they went on with their lives and continued to just be social people. But then when they're interacting at this point, it's like they're children again. And I don't know. For me, that was another scene that was a little bit forced. But it was still like, it leads into good things. So, whatevs. I mean, I feel like we've been spending a lot of time criticizing
that's actually
the flaws of this film instead of praising how really good so many scenes in this film are.
Yeah, this, like, don't get us wrong.
It's tremendously good.
I honestly consider a lot of the stuff that you guys have been talking about as kind of nitpicky, but this movie, I do think that this is a fantastic movie, especially when you get towards the end, because, like, I will admit, there were one or two scenes in this movie where I was weeping. I wasn't bawling my eyes out, but, like, yeah, this movie gets really intense pretty quick.
I cried a hell of a lot. There were... Oh, man. The scene when Nishimiya's mom bows down to
not
Ishida's
just
mom.
that scene, but the scene
oh
afterwards.
My god. I was losing
that whole scene when
so
Ishida's
bad.
in the hospital and how everyone reacts. Like, like that. Some very powerful. Like, you feel
really
a lot
good.
of emotions with this film. You're going to get angry. You're going to be hurt. You're going to be scared. I know, like, for me, and I might have to just break this scene down. I loved it so much with Nishimiya's suicide again. It was so... Because you see her, she's standing on the balcony ready to jump, and the way it cuts, the curtains get in the way, and you're like, fuck, no, get there. You're like, I was getting there, like, yelling at freaking Ishida, go.
Me, like,
my blood was pumping.
That scene was where he hit the table when he tried to run, and he was laying there, and
yes.
Oh my god,
and he
get
just
up.
Yells. But she can't hear him.
Because, like, and it's that
He's
thought
yelling,
runs.
and she can't hear him. And
Yeah,
it's just
I know.
like, oh my gosh, and you're just sitting there, it's like, even now.
Yeah, because at that moment, because, like, you're thinking just like, dude, call out to her, and then you realize, that's not going to work.
It's really good. And then, like, when it shifts, because there's, like, a really good balance in this film between, like, being really grounded and realistic and then shifting immediately into, like, really expressionist visuals. And that scene where, like, there are parts when he trips that feel real. Like, that whole scene when he's trying to get
visceral.
to her is very... It's grounded and visceral. Yeah, it's a good word for it. It feels like you're there. And then when they swap and he ends up falling into the water, it suddenly just snaps into, like, this totally different, like, very emotional, expressionist, like...
Well, for me, my favorite scene was actually the scene just before it where she gets up from watching the fireworks and they're saying goodbye to each other.
Man. Something wrong.
Yes. You feel like there's something wrong.
Yeah, like the entire time you're just like, man, there is something really off about the situation. And for me, where the penny dropped for me in that scene was where he says, I'll see you later in sign language.
Says, sayonara, goodbye.
And she just says, thank you.
Was it thank you?
Yeah, she just says, thank you. And walks away. And it was just like, whoa, that's a very final thing to say.
It's a good twist on, like, on your expectations, because when the mom and the sister leave, you expect it to go into, like, a romance scene, but it plays, like, really flat.
Yeah, because, like, the moment says...
And then she walks away, and you're like, oh, there's something really, really wrong in this. And it does it without, like... any sort of cues.
Yeah.
It's just very
because
naturally
you don't know
makes
what's
you feel like
inside Nishimiya's
something's
head.
off.
Especially when
we've been spending so much time inside of Ishida's head.
Mm-hmm.
We were deaf. I really want to capitalize on that, because that's really what the thing is about. We were totally and completely deaf to whatever else everyone else was feeling, and it's just like the movie just totally takes you for a whirlwind ride when it comes to understanding another human's emotions and how impossible that is to some degree. It's just like, wow, like a human is such a deeply complex and flawed creature that we really have to take care of each other. We really have to. Like, to some degree, like, we're talking about a physical disability, being deaf, but, Nishimiya makes it by just fine as long as people take care of her. But the thing is, depression or guilt or just being flawed, we need to take care of each other. And I think that was the ultimate message of the film, because once those X's fall down, you realize, wait, Ishida's going to take care of his friends the same way they're going to take care of him. Like, especially when, what was it? In the manga, he wants to make a movie, but what was the guy who kind of had the afro-ish hair?
Tomohiro.
Yeah, Tomohiro. Like, he's totally there for Ishida the whole entire, like, best friend of the year.
He's a good pal. He's pretty flat, but it works for him because Ishida needs somebody who is just like, yeah, he needs somebody that's just always there for him. That scene at the end with him is really nice too, when he approaches him in the
bathroom,
with the mustache, when he goes into the bathroom. I was like, oh yeah, this is good stuff.
Great phrasing there.
Yeah, this is the good stuff.
Yes, I highly recommend this movie. I would actually consider this to be mandatory viewing, because this movie is really just something special, and in terms of just how many different emotions it goes through, and the way that everything is framed in this movie. It's just like, this movie is beautifully animated. Like, this movie is...
It's the animation is in... Oh, it is unbelievable. The hands... Like... Yeah, it had to be, but like, oh my god, they did it. It's an achievement.
Yeah. Well, not because, like, to go back to the scene that I was talking about prior, where she's saying thank you, like, you know, there's no subtitles to say that that's what she said, but you know that because of she's used that sign language previously in the movie beforehand. So, like, you as an audience member are slowly kind of learning the language along with the main character and picking up on several different expressions that they're saying.
Well, the sign language starts to define the characters. Yeah. Like, you start to, like, that whole little, like, little sideways peace sign is kind of like, you know, later, you know, like, that defines a character.
You feel like there's a bit of a performative aspect to when communication with the sign language. And early on, when you have Ishida who is doing the sign language, like, you can feel that he's excited just to be communicating with this skill that he has. Like, he just there's just something about the way that he moves that, like, you understand that he's happy that he's able to finally communicate with this person on her own terms, in a way that he couldn't when he was a kid. Like, he's at least bridged one gap, which, I mean, later you find out that, like, he's still blocking out a lot, but it's the way that he's animated and the way that, like, it's directed, it does a really great job of just everybody. You really feel how their movements play into their character, and that, I think, is, like, it probably one of the most important aspects of this film. Like, in terms of, I mean, it is a landmark for animation in terms of depicting realistic.
The only thing
movements.
Visually that I have a gripe with is, and I know this is going to make some people mad, so I'm just going to kind of just say, I kind of felt the gloss and blur for a 2-hour film was a little self-indulgent of KyoAni. It's like, okay, I get it. I fucking get it.
I don't know, because, like, I kind of feel like Wandering Sun, that series that came out a while ago, did that way worse than this movie did. I don't know. It didn't really bother me all that much.
I mean, there are a lot of movies that do it a lot worse. I think that at least this film has a very cohesive, like, coloring that it feels like, even though that there's the effect that's, like, always there, like, it almost feels it never feels disconnected from the film in a sense, because it reflects well. Like, most of the films that go heavy on that stuff have, like, really messy color effects.
And this one is pretty tight.
A lot
pretty
more
tight. Colors were really, really good.
And I mean, generally the direction is just fantastic. Like, this is the film, like, it pushes, like, I've always been a Yamada fan, but this one really pushes me to say that she's probably the best KyoAni director, even though, like, I love me some Takamoto. Koe no Katachi and Tamako Love Story before it, she's pushing boundaries with her films.
Yeah, same here. Like, I will have to check out more of this director's films, because like this was a fantastic movie. Like, this is going to be one of those movies where I'll probably shove it on to normal people outside of the anime community, because like this movie is just, it's so good.
This is probably a hella good mom film.
Yes,
there are some good moms.
I would
in this.
actually like really recommend this with my dad, because my dad, kind of like what I was explaining before, we have several, we have relationships with special needs people and whatnot, and I think my dad would get a major kick out of this movie. It might be, like, for me, it would probably be really rough for him to sit through the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes of this movie, but after that, that's where this movie, it's all worth it for me in this movie, because I was getting some major flashbacks to the other really big bully anime, in my opinion, the Flowers of Evil.
Oh, wow, that's a
well,
no.
Again, just kind of in general bullying kind of sense. Again, just like I said before, I don't like watching people get bullied, and I kind of feel like Flowers of Evil was basically just watching someone get bullied for 13 episodes straight. And for me, I kind of feel like Flowers of Evil didn't really have a point outside of bullying is bad. Well, this movie, it does make a point about guilt and says so much more about, how we should help people learn to grow and develop as human beings, and learning how to sympathize with other people. And like, I feel like there's a point to the bullying that's going on in this movie outside of just watching someone get horribly bullied. So I feel like that can be a really hard thing to do in movies about bullying, and I think this movie nails it perfectly, and I would highly recommend it for that.
I'd say this movie's probably like a 9 out of 10, maybe 8 out of 10. Some of the parts, it depends. I don't know. Some of the parts really bother me, but everything else about it is pretty fucking spot on. Like, probably closer to a 9, but if I'm feeling snarky, an 8. I don't know. It's like right there. It's at that cusp. It's not perfect.
I am not going to give it like a number score, because I don't even do that shit anymore, but I will say that I'm glad I lowered my expectations before going into this film, because I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be the best thing ever. This is gonna be the best film ever. And honestly, it's really, really good, but I still probably prefer Tamako Love Story overall as the superior Yamada film. I'll get some shit for that, but I know some other people who feel the same. It's just, to me, like, if it had less narrative in general, I feel like this would have been better. Like, if they cut a lot of things out and just focused more, it would have felt better.
Jimmy, you can't focus on the visuals, not with the visual medium.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe that was
yeah.
I know. I was gonna make an actual response to that, but I was like, nah. But Love Story comes out on Blu-ray soon too, so maybe.
Nice. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime.
Yeah,
in the future.
That's a really good movie.
So let's go ahead and wind down with a Patreon question. And this week, our Patreon question is from Lum Ramayasha. Lum Ramayasha's question basically has to deal with the subject that we talked about last week, which was the New York Times article of Boomerang and Twitter. I'm sorry, Boomerang and Crunchyroll.
It's almost the same thing.
Yeah, basically. Basically kind of wanted to know what the backlash against the writer's piece was about. Kind of our thoughts and opinions on that. To fully kind of read the question, do your sympathies like with the writer, the fans, or is everyone involved in the wrong here for how they were behaving during the fallout? Last week, me and Grant kind of talked about this a little bit. We didn't really want to focus on the writer backlash of it, because we kind of felt like there was no real point to. We're not necessarily saying anything that he did was wrong. Well, or right either, but it's one of those... It's one of those things where I kind of feel like the article itself was kind of the main thing, and there's a point, like, I like to have a separation between the artist and the work that they do, And the same thing kind of applies to writers in that sense. So I could really care less for what the writer is doing. And for me, I really just kind of wanted to focus on just the article. But since we have two people who weren't on last week's podcast, what were your guys' thoughts on that real quick?
I don't really have strong thoughts because I still haven't read the article. I'm sorry. But I just, that sort of drama stuff, I try to not associate with it.
Well, I think, unfortunately, a lot of this played out in perhaps the worst possible way for a little bit and then got a little bit better towards the end. And now we're kind of on stable footing. Like all drama, it kind of evens out. But I don't think the article was wrong. I think it was just an opinion. And when you're writing for a very popular publication, you're getting paid to do so, and you have an opinion that a lot of people feel misrepresents them, I think those people have the right to stand up and say, no, sir, you're wrong. And unfortunately, because he's popular, writing for a popular publication, there was a lot of backlash, and not all of it. I want to be very clear here. There are a lot of people who took it way too far. You don't death threat or insult people. You don't need to. You just need to say, hey, look, it's very clear that you have a bias, and I feel like you misrepresented me as a consumer with that bias, or whatever the case may be.
I mean, our site takes a lot of shit for some of the things that we say, and like,
right,
I can feel that.
I mean, we're not getting.
We've
no
been
one
there.
has called in yet saying like, oh yeah, you're gonna die because of what you said for Flip Flappers or Maid Dragon or whatever silly thing like that. But I do think, unfortunately, one of our best responses as a fandom came from Thoughts That Move. And unfortunately, that guy was pretty much thrown to the dogs by his own fandom, which I felt was, quite frankly, unfair. He had a really good response to it. I really stand by Tim and what he was doing with that. He kept it civil. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people moved in and kind of pulled the rug out from under him. We had a great, if we had just stood by him and said, hey, look, this is kind of how the fandom feels, we could have had a very cohesive statement, but instead, we slipped right back into what we're currently doing now, and I think the problem, really, and this is too broad, so I'm going to curb it here, but I think the real problem is, as a fandom, we can't really identify what we all agree anime is, and so this stupid argument coming back from, well, anime is just really sleazy cartoons, I thought that was put away in the 90s, but apparently that's always going to come back until we as a fandom can kind of cohesively think about that and get that taken care of. Or something.
I also think on the other hand, like the other issue, the other fandom issue that sort of bears its teeth during this drama section thing is anime fans tend to identify too much with their consumptive habits of media. And
I don't even know if that's anime fandom. I think that's just
fandom in general. That's true.
You don't own the thing that you like, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like anime fans feel the need, like when somebody writes about anime as a general thing and they have poor opinions that they don't agree with, like people feel personally attacked because they identify so much with the media that they consume. I think that's a big issue.
I agree.
People need to get over.
I mean, that's a little harsh, but I mean, it's true. Like, at the end of the day, we don't own this shit. None of it. I mean, as it is, like, people over here in the U.S. pretty much just renting it.
People are way more important. Like, real breathing people are way more important than
But anime
media.
is real, Jimmy Gnome. Anime is real. I don't know. I just feel like out of all that, I don't think anything that was said that was rationally and reasonably said to the New York Times writer was wrong or undeserving. Like, when you're that big, you're going to get some criticism. I think the people who were crazy and they said some stupid stuff, and that is an outlier. That I don't condone, don't want to be associated with. I really feel like we should have stood by, not we necessarily as a site, but I mean as a fandom, as an entire anime fandom should have stood more with Thoughts That Move on that one. But anyway, that's a personal thing.
We also got another question from Lam Rama Yasha. It's basically asking our opinions about the nature of adaptations with a silent voice. The question is, what are the film's greatest strengths and weaknesses as an adaptation? Did translating a silent voice into an audiovisual medium enhance the story in any particular meaningful way, particularly when it comes to depicting Sayoko's deafness?
I think we pretty much already covered that. Like, it does
Right.
a pretty damn good job, at least, of carrying over those the deafness and like using the medium to its best advantage. But as we mentioned, there's some friction with the manga.
Yeah, I do think the manga is the superior version because that's the way it was intended to be told, and so it kind of gets that benefit. I think, obviously, having both of us having read the manga, I think we'll appreciate the manga better, to be honest with you, Lum Ramayasha, Sid. But I think ultimately, yeah, the manga is probably the better. Some things you can do, like there's actually moments that happen that can just freeze in time. You can't do that with anime. So.
Well, I mean, you probably could do that with anime, but I feel like the what they were going for in this movie was to depict it in a different light, and I feel like what they did in this movie depicted everything that they needed to for the sake of the movie. Again, I haven't seen the manga, or read it. I'm sure it's good. In terms of like adaptations, I don't necessarily look for pinpoint accuracy or something like that. I just want to make sure that the nature of the story that was originally told is intact, and that's always kind of my general assumptions with adaptations. And from my very loose knowledge of everything that I know of A Silent Voice, it seems like everything's there. But again, Josh would know more about that than me. So.
I do want to mention, while we're kind of just passing by, I feel it would be wrong if I didn't say this. The manga actually is like accredited by the Japanese deaf, I forget what it's called, the Japanese Deaf Foundation or something like that, like the foundation to helping deaf people in Japan, that main government branch, well, not branch, sorry, but that main foundation. This is a manga supported by them, and so it is kind of the manga is not just a nameless, another Shonen Jump title. This is kind of a big deal, so.
Thank you very much for those questions. We have another question from a Dan H., who is asking which manga we would like to see get the Nakako Yamada treatment, who is the director of this movie.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys go ahead and go first?
If I mean, honestly, like, I feel like Yamada is probably best taking material that isn't very narrative driven. I personally feel like my go-to answer for this question with practically anyone that I like is probably going to be Yokohama Kadashi Kiko, but I feel like she would probably be a particularly good fit because she's excellent at enhancing individual moments and embedding them with a specific feeling, and that's basically what YKK is all about. So that'd probably be my choice.
If I had to pick something,
okay,
I probably would pick In Clothes Called Fat by Moyoko Ano. Yeah, and that's why I kind of pick it, is because I want to, like, I don't know what that looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have no preconceived notion of what KyoAni plus Moyoko Ano would look like. Although I think if someone were to do it, I think Yamada would probably be the best one to. I actually, to be honest with you, I want to see something along those lines. I want to see something by Moyoko Ano. I just thinking In Clothes Called Fat is probably maybe the closest thing that Moyoko Ano has that relates to A Silent Voice in terms of like social and that.
Yeah, I feel the comparison. Like, my same gut feeling when you said that was the same gut feeling that I had when I first saw that Yamada was directing A Silent Voice, and it's just like, but then this turned out really well. I think that Moyoko Ano's kind of sketchy style would be very well translated. Would be translated pretty well into. Just look at how KyoAni did the animation for some of these lines. Like, anyway, the line art. Oh, it's so really intact. Nice. It's so good. But I'm just thinking, like, that would be a perfect match. Like, if they could just mimic that for Moyoko Ano, I think. Because Moyoko Ano tends to be real, but she is also the most real you can get without stepping into the surreal, if that makes sense. So things can be a tad bit extreme, but yet at the same time very well grounded in her manga. And I think KyoAni is right about the the right consistent, because you can't hand this shit to Shaft. You know what I'm saying? It'd just be too much. So I think this would be That would be awful.
Yeah, I don't think I would like it
that.
either. I mean, like
Yeah.
maybe Production IG, but I can't think of anyone at Production IG that would like they would get the aesthetic right, but not the emotional content. I think KyoAni would approximate the aesthetic and probably get pretty damn close to the emotional content. I think that would probably be my pick, though, is a Moyoko Anno property, specifically Enclosed Call Fat.
One that I would like to see done as an adaptation by this director, and maybe this is just kind of showing my limited scope of what kind of manga that I read, but I would really kind of like to see them tackle Inspector Keaton.
Oh, wow.
Because that is... Because that, like it is like a really fascinating kind of drama stuff that goes on in the story that has
What if
these,
Inspector Keaton
like,
gets
really
curious?
fine attentions to detail. But I don't know. Like it's one of those things where it's just like I'm trying to think of like a grounded kind of series, that I've read. Just for clarification, I don't know if you guys would call Inspector Keaton grounded or not, but
Isn't it Master Keaton?
Yeah, it is Master Keaton, actually.
Am
I'm
I
thinking,
wrong?
yeah, you're right. It is Master Keaton,
Oh,
but he is an inspector of sorts, so.
yeah. I mean he does
Yeah.
do work for tax people. It's been a while since
He's
I've
like
read it.
Inspector Gadget.
That's really interesting. Like, because I don't know. For
Yeah,
me,
'cause-
like that author,
Naoki Urasawa. Yeah.
Urasawa. Yeah, I feel like he's pretty
Ooh.
dry. Most
Monster
of the time.
as
I don't
animated
know.
by KyoAni.
Like, I
Johan
that'd
would be so
awful.
cute.
I'd hate that.
Well, I mean, because like if you haven't read Master Keaton, like there are some really good grounded moments with him basically trying to be a father to his daughter and kind of hanging out with his dad, who was also an investigator, and just like there are some really good moments I think that this director would do really, really well in this, and I would also kind of like to see what this person would do with a kind of a different genre as well, because like when you think of good directors like Stanley Kubrick, they don't stick with just one genre. They're not a one-trick pony, so I wouldn't like to see the director do just the one type of genre. I would like them to see branch out into other things, so I would think that with what this director has done so far with this movie, I would like them to branch off into more of an action kind of orientation for a film that still has these really great grounded elements and very human storytelling that goes on in Master Keaton. So that would be my pick.
Another, I just came up off the top of my head with another one. Solanin by
I'm not sure how I
his
feel
name?
about that.
Inio Asano. I feel like that would be a pretty good pick. I mean, it's basic, like it's pretty much the same kind of material as this, except with like not. It doesn't involve disabilities, but there's a similar.
I don't know
like,
how I'd
tone,
feel
I
about
guess.
that. I feel like the aesthetic for Solanin plus KyoAni would be. It matches too. I know. I feel like it matches
Lost.
too well. I feel like it'd be an oversaturation,
Too
and
well.
I'm not keen on that idea. If that makes any sense, I'm thinking like, well, that's kind of what they already do, and just like I don't really want to see more of that. I want to see. I honestly want to see. I would be happy if they grabbed like some random Shonen Jump property and saved it from like this really long ass running. I don't know. Do Black Clover for
No,
Christ
I don't know.
Jesus.
That would. I'd hate that. Jeez, I want my directors working on good
JoJo's Part
things,
5.
please.
KyoAni style.
And at the end of our show, like we're always going to do, we'd like to go ahead and have this time right now to give a little shout out to our 10 plus backers on the Patreon, and those are Osama_A, Cornelia Natsudi, Chris Magnifico, and Ben Grant. Thank you very much for your donations. We very much appreciate it. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much, Josh and Jimmy, for being on this week. I really enjoyed your company. This was a great movie. I'm not too sure if I would have watched it unless you guys had suggested it for the show, so I am actually quite thankful that you guys suggested this, because this was a great movie. I'm really glad that you guys kind of forced me to watch it, even if it was for the podcast. But still, I'm glad I saw it. I want to tell other people to go see it, and I think that's the important thing to walk away with from this episode. It's not perfect, but what is in life?
That's right.
Thanks again for listening. Where can they find you on the internets?
I am at JimmyGnome9 on Twitter.
And I'm Josh_Dunham on Twitter. You're listening to this podcast, which I guess means you know where Wave Motion Cannon is, so drop me a line. Let's talk about stuff. If I said anything on the podcast you didn't agree with, let's hash it out, I suppose. Open a discussion.
Yes, I think the important thing is that we have a discussion, not a brawl. No, don't fight. No fighting.
Yes, no fighting. This is not a shonen anime. This is real-life anime.
Yes. Yes, this is the anime that we like to call life, or something in between.
It's just a slice of life, CJ.
Yes.
This hour-long podcast is a slice of life.
Damn, never thought about that.
But this podcast also isn't anime, so...
Yeah. I don't know about that, because we're not a visual medium.
It's
All
not
right,
visual.
guys, let's wrap this up. This is getting dumb.
All right, you want to plug the Patreon real quick so we get out of
This
here?
is why we don't. This is why we don't get Josh on.
So, if you like the show, if you want to submit a question to us to read onto the show, go ahead and come to our Patreon. It's $1 to join on. If you want to give more, you're more than welcome to. But again, $1 is pretty much what we're asking for. And you don't even have to do that. Again, we would prefer it if you did. But
It'd be nice.
It helps pay for a lot of stuff. A lot of the free stuff we give out, such as translations or podcasting, hosting for the podcast and paying for the site domain. I mean, obviously there's at least a couple. Well, there's actually more than a couple hundred of you. There's at least 1,000 plus of you who listen to the show on regular. So I think it would be great if just even a handful of you just said, you know what, I like this show. I'm going to donate $1. Or hell, donate, get us all a beer or something. So,
I don't drink alcohol, but, I would be okay with a root beer.
Well, you just pour the beer into a square cup.
Well,
Then it's root beer. That was math.
I mean, if it's good enough for Frankie,
That
it's
was
good
dumb.
enough for me.
All right.
Anyway, I'll see you guys next week.